Hey, I hope you're doing well. My name's Jake. I'm a big fan of making music, and for as long as I can remember, I've dreamed of just traveling across the country playing shows. Making music obviously brings me so much joy. But it's more than that. I like seeing new places, I like meeting new people. I've been blessed to play shows all over Northeast United States, and I've worked full time in the music business for the better part of half a decade. But touring across the country really does still seem like a far off dream. I'm afraid of the cost. I'm afraid it's going to chew up my PTO at work. And I'm afraid that worrying about these kinds of things is just going to take all of the fun out of going on the tour in the first place. So, in thinking about how to address those challenges, I keep coming back to the same thought over and over again, which is, what if I just built a camper van? If I'm going to figure out if this makes any sense for me, I got to just start making decisions. And I think a lot of those fundamental choices can probably fit on something as small as a note card. Let me just start by writing down why I'm doing this, because that's going to inform every decision that I make along the way. And there you have it. I want to go on tour. Now, I'll probably do other stuff along the way as well, but that's my primary goal, and that's what I'm going to use as my North Star for everything else I write on this page. So in the United States, there's 3 manufacturers that are making Sprinter vans. You have Ford, Ram, and Mercedes. I've done a little bit of research, and quite honestly, the Mercedes is just too expensive for me. I can't afford to get locked into Mercedes parts or to get locked into working with Mercedes mechanics. As nice as those look, it's really not going to be the one for me. I actually went ahead and test drove a Ram, and I'll be honest, as hopeful as I was, it really felt kind of strange to drive. I'm sure it's something that I would get used to, but I've also heard that the Rams will have mechanical issues. Now, I'm sure every vehicle is different, but the thought of running into some sort of major mechanical issue after like 100,000 miles definitely has me a little nervous. And so for those 2 reasons together, it seems like my only real option is to go for the Ford. Ford Transits come in 3 different heights. You have the low, medium, and high roof. Now, personally, I think I'd be comfortable in a medium roof van, and that's keeping in mind that the floor is going to take a couple inches of height away from me, and so is the ceiling. However, I want to go on tour, and I don't know who I'm going to be touring with, and I don't know how tall they're going to be. So I really think my only option here is to just go with the high roof. The vans also come in 3 different length options, basically a short, medium, and extended length. And I think a serious case can be made for going with the extended van in most circumstances. There is not a lot of space in these campers, so 2 feet doesn't sound like a lot when you live in an apartment, but it makes a world of difference when you're building out a van. However, I'm going to be on tour, and that means I'm going to be in cities often. Might not be where I am all of the time, but it's something I should optimize my build for. So this is a tricky thing, because I might have to parallel park. I'm probably going to be in dense traffic, but I'm going to be traveling with a few other people, and I need to optimize for these opposing forces. So for that reason, I think I have to go with the medium length van. Ford offers these with both a diesel engine and a gas engine, and I'll be honest, I don't know a lot about the differences between the two, but from some quick reading, it looks like the diesel engines offer more torque, which could be good in some circumstances, but they also come with higher maintenance costs, and the reality is I'm not planning to overload this vehicle. It will be heavy, but it won't be super heavy, and I'm not going to be going off-road very much, so I don't think I need that extra torque. I'm probably better off just going with the gas engine in this case. Now, along that same train of thought, there are different engine sizes, and I don't think I need the beefiest possible engine, but I am going to have built-ins, I'm going to have people, music equipment, potentially some merchandise. So I think going with maybe the medium-size engine is going to pay dividends in the long run, and that would be the 250 size. And just for good measure, I'm going to make a note that I don't want a vehicle that's more than 5 years old or over 50,000 miles. It really doesn't make sense to buy a beater if I'm going to spend another few $1,000s building it out from there. I want that investment to last me a while. So now that I've got that all ironed out, I want to make a list of the amenities that I'd like to include in the build. First and foremost, I want to seat and sleep as many people as possible so that I can take a band on tour. Realistically, the maximum number of seatbelts I'm going to fit in this thing is 4, and I think that I've figured out a way I can sleep 3 people without seriously breaking the bank. I'm definitely going to want a kitchenette type situation with a sink, a fridge, and a cooktop of some kind. That way we can feed the band. And I also want to make sure I have a good place to do some computer work. That way I don't necessarily have to take time off of my day job while I'm on the road. And the last non-negotiable amenity here is going to be a toilet. I hope I don't have to use it all that much, but I think it would just be plain irresponsible to not have one in the vehicle, especially when I'm planning to tour with other people. And while it's good to have a list of the things I want to include, I also want to make a list of the stuff I'm going to intentionally exclude. Top of that list is going to be a shower. It would be cool in certain circumstances, but the reality is I would need to go with an extended length vehicle to even have the space to do that, and I just don't think it's worth that trade-off. Similarly, I'm going to exclude a hot water system. Don't get me wrong, I think it would be nice, but it's just going to add a layer of complexity and cost to the build that I don't want to deal with. The last thing I'm putting on this list is extra windows, and I know that's a very contentious topic in this space, but hear me out. 80% of the time, we're going to be in cities, and I know that to the trained eye, they'll still be able to spot that it's a camper van because of the roof rack and the vent fans and things like that, but anything that I can do to make the average passerby keep on walking without a second thought is probably going to be worth it. And even though it would be a lot easier to do the windows right at the beginning, technically speaking, I will have the option to go back and cut a hole in the side of the van, and that's not something that I can easily undo. So until I've actually lived in the van, I think I'm better off just not cutting any extra holes. So now that I've worked out the fundamental decisions about what the van is going to be, I can start to think about what the interior should look like. I've actually been using a 3D modeling software to do that, and let me show you what I've got so far. So this is the software that I'm using. It's called SketchUp, and I started by just grabbing some dimensions for the floor of the specific vehicle model that I'm looking at. I was able to find those in a forum somewhere. This here towards the bottom of the screen is the back of the van. These boxes are actually the wheel wells where the rear wheels of the vehicle go. This is going to be the side with the sliding door cut out right here. And then this is going to be the driver's side where, in a cargo van, there would just be a sheet metal panel. There might be a window if it was a passenger van. Now, one of the first things I wanted to sort out is where am I going to put my systems? In other words, where's my water tank going to go? Where are my electrical components going to go? And one thing that seemed really appealing to me was to use an over wheel well water tank. It would look something like this. And so that, very conveniently takes advantage of some otherwise, honestly, dead space in the van. And of course, I wouldn't want that exposed, so I'd put a bench over it and it would look something like this. And just like that, I've got a plan for my water tank, which is a pretty big component. And I also have a seat, which is cool. Symmetry is honestly going to be my best friend in this process. And so I'll put another bench over the other wheel well. And it's already coming together. And actually, this dead space in here would be perfect for all of the electrical components. I haven't worked out exactly how the different pieces would fit together, but I'm pretty confident that that's enough space to fit batteries, an inverter, charge controller, and those various, odds and ends that get used for the electrical system. Now, a lot of vans end up using these two benches plus a table to do a converting bed system, and I think that would be the path that I would want to go. So the table would be something like that, and then it would drop down. You could put the cushions from the tops of the benches over the table, and now you have essentially, it's like a full-size bed. So that's great when I would be traveling solo, but then at the same time, the benches are kind of separate zones if I'm traveling with multiple people. Now, I said I wanted a kitchen in this thing, and I think the best spot to do that would actually be sort of right here by the sliding door. And so it looks something like this. And so you can see, there's a sink and there's a small counter that actually hangs over the sliding door a little bit. That's a very, common design, as well as this little flip-up extension. And my thinking here is if, say, the fridge is below the sink and you have this flip-up extension, then in theory, someone could tuck their little feet inside this little hole in the side of the kitchen,
And while it's not the most comfortable, it would be a way to sort of extend the bench to allow someone to sleep a bit more comfortably if we wanted to sleep one person on this bench. I know it's a little clown car, it's a little crazy, but it was the best I could come up with in this design process. I think it works. Now, another thing I said I wanted was a toilet, and I think I just put that on the other wall. And again, I'd probably put it in a box so I'm not looking at it, and I could do the exact same thing where I could have a little cutout, and that way in a pinch, two people can sleep separately in the back of the van. That way, if one person's going to bed way earlier or later than the other, they sort of have the autonomy to kind of do their own thing on their side of the vehicle. I also said that it was important to have 4 seat belts. And so the only real way to accomplish that is obviously there's the 2 in the front that aren't even built into this design process, but then I would also need a bench seat that would, safely offer those seat belts. I don't know the exact dimensions of the bench seat, but roughly speaking, it would be something that fits inside of this box here. And so this whole design is kind of worked around making sure that there's space for that bench seat. Now, in a pinch, that could also be an area where someone could relax. Maybe they pull a drawer out from the kitchen to kind of give them a little bit more support beyond where the bench ends. Not the most comfortable way to sleep, but, it's an option if we really need to cram a bunch of people into this thing. And of course, the last thing we're missing here are the walls. Let me show you those. So in this wall, I was thinking that we could add a 12-volt TV. That way, we can watch shows or do some work on an external screen kind of thing. This is the shorter wall because of the sliding doors, so this is hopefully giving you a good sense of how the kitchen is going to overhang a little bit into the opening of the sliding door. And then we would also do the same thing on this side as well. And because I'm not planning to cut any windows, at least at first, I think the best use of this space is going to be some upper cabinets. This will be the fundamental way to store clothing and supplies that are used, like kitchen supplies, things like that. So I think this is going to be a really important part of the build, is to make sure that there's ample upper cabinet storage space. And again, symmetry is going to be my best friend, so I'll do the same thing over here, and it'll look like that. And so there you have it, pretty comprehensive design. Now, of course, the dimensions all have a little bit of play with them. I won't know until I actually get a van and take the final measurements, but I think there is a reasonable plan to accomplish all of the things I put on that note card. Seating 4 people with seatbelts, sleeping 3 people, having a place to cook, having a place to work, and of course having a toilet as well. And the upper cabinet storage should offer enough space for us to each bring at least some clothes and things like that. Now, as far as the music supplies themselves, we would definitely have to get creative about how we pack those into the van, but there is floor space under the table, and there is little crevices between the cabinets and the bench seat, for instance, under the bench seat. Again, we would have to get very creative about how we actually just pack everything in, but I might even be able to eke in a little long cabinet kind of thing in front of the electrical or in front of the plumbing that will allow us to slide a bass or slide a keyboard into those bench seats. Now, with the design for the van more or less sorted, it's time to dive into everybody's favorite thing, the budget. Now, after doing a ton of research, this is what I was able to put together for a budget. I'm sure the final costs will be different, but I feel like this is a pretty good roadmap for achieving what we laid out in that 3D model. As you can see, the bottom line for this thing would be right around $50,000. It's definitely pretty steep, but most of that is coming from the vehicle because, again, I said that I wanted to get something that was no more than 5 years old. So after looking into what's on the market right now, it looks like it would cost about $35,000 for the vehicle itself. And that means that the build is going to add an additional $15,000 or $16,000 to the actual cost. I've broken the build into different categories. For the floor, walls, and ceiling, I'm estimating that's going to be about $1.2K. That's insulation and the subfloor, the furring strips to actually connect everything together. And then I'd like to do shiplap panels on the side. I think that would be a good look. It would be durable, be relatively easy to put together compared to, say, like sheet panels and stuff. So it's probably $1.2K for that category.
what I'm calling the helm here, basically everything that wasn't in the 3D model at the very front of the van. So swivel seats, and then, yeah, also building in the double bench to the budget. Is definitely a pricey item, but I think a necessary one. As well as window shades and a curtain to separate the front from the back of the van. It's going to be just shy of $3,000. Now, as far as appliances, I'd want to definitely have a Starlink receiver so that I can do some work from the van, but also a couple Max Air fans, 12-volt TV, lighting, a fridge, and the toilet. It's probably going to be about $2,000 for that category. Now, here's where things get really expensive. The electrical system has a ton of components, and it is predominantly a battery-based system, and batteries are expensive. So I have to give a massive shout out to Explorist Life. They're on YouTube. Go check out their channel if you're at all interested in this stuff. They put together this spreadsheet, which allows you to organize electrical appliances based on essentially like how they're wired, to determine what the ultimate battery capacity and solar capacity that you're going to need for all of those items is going to be. They have a fantastic video walking through how to fill out this spreadsheet, and it was very helpful for me to basically make note of all of those appliances I just mentioned and determine that for me, I probably need about 400 amp hours of battery. I'm going to need about, 800 watts of solar if I really want to lean on solar. And I'll need a 3,000 watt inverter as well. And so I've built all of those things into the budget. Smaller odds and ends that go into the system, like the shunt and the bus bar and things like that. I'm thinking it's going to be about 5.3K for this category. Plumbing, I'm trying to keep really, really simple, so I don't want to do hot water. I don't want to deal with an electrical pump even, because I'm just worried that it's going to be hard to winterize the system if it's really complicated. So I'm really just looking at the water tank, a foot pump, a faucet, and plumbing line. Might be about $500. As far as heating the van, I plan to do that from the gas tank, and there's actually a system that does exactly that. It is pricey, it's about $1,400, but you basically just put a tube in the gas tank, cut a hole to get the heat flowing into the van, and that's going to keep things nice and toasty. Now, as far as the kitchen's concerned, it's going to be relatively simple, but there's still going to be some costs. So, I'll have a sink and an induction stovetop, induction cookware as well that's compatible with that stovetop, as well as drawers and drawer pulls, the plywood to put the whole box together. I think it's going to be about $700 for that category. Now, the dinette that sort of also converts into the full-size bed that we were talking about with the 3D model, that's going to be maybe about $800 between framing it out of extruded aluminum, some faceplates, some cushions, the fabric for those cushions, the table, and all of the hardware that's going on there. Lastly, we have the overhead cabinets. It's just going to be very similar box construction with some extruded aluminum framing, some hinges, and some faceplates. I'm thinking it might be another $500. So at this point, I think it's fair to say I've done some pretty extensive prep and research to look into whether or not I should build a van. I've given some really great thought to the essential features for my specific needs. I've built a 3D model that I think comprehensively explains what would go into that build. And I've also built a pretty decent budget to get a sense of what it would cost. And so the million-dollar question here is, should I build a camper van for touring? And quite honestly, I think for me right now at this juncture in my life, the answer is actually no. Don't get me wrong, this would be so cool. It would be an amazing way to get hands-on with something that connects me to my ultimate vision for my life of going and playing shows all over the world. I think it would be a really fun lifestyle. I think it would have a lot of great memories along the way. But there are some serious things to consider as well. Predominantly, it's the upfront cost. $50,000 is doable for me right now, but it's a stretch, and it would change my personal financial situation in a very significant way. I'm also thinking about whether or not this is actually compatible with how I live my life right now. So for instance, I live in Brooklyn, which means I'd have to park this van in Brooklyn for quite a bit of time throughout the year. I have a rent that I have to pay every month, and I like my place, so I don't necessarily want to move out to go live in the van full time, or even to move out and work on building the van for 6 or 9 months, something like that. So this is a pretty bittersweet moment for me because I've put about 6 months of every single day putting in some research or learning about how to put these vans together. I've had a lot of fun thinking about what my life would look like if I actually did this. And at the same time, I think at this particular juncture in my life, it doesn't feel compatible with what I'm trying to do. And that's not to say I won't build a van in the future. I do think this is a really cool idea, and this is easily something that I would want to come back to when I either have more money or more time, or maybe I'm just done living in New York City and I'm ready for a different chapter in my life. The other thing I'll mention is that this does not deter me from going on that tour. By not putting $15,000 into the build, plus signing up for a car loan on a $35,000 vehicle, I'm going to have some opportunities to go maybe buy a relatively cheap car. I don't know, $10,000 or $15,000, something like that. And that's going to be my means of going and playing shows in other cities. I live in New York City, which is a fantastic place to do music, but it's also close to a lot of cities here on the East Coast. And I'm really looking forward to the opportunity to just take day trips with a car and go test the waters as far as touring in my immediate area. If that goes really well, I can venture further out and go further down the East Coast of the United States. And maybe someday I could even plan a tour where we hop on a plane and go rent a car on the West Coast or something like that. Really, there are tons and tons of opportunities to go and play shows, even if I'm not doing it in a van. As romantic as it would be, it just doesn't feel like what I'm up to right this second. Now, all that being said, I would love to hear from you. So please drop a comment below if you have any thoughts on this topic. Maybe you live in a van. Maybe you've just thought about doing van life. Maybe you actually have thought quite a lot about this exact idea of using a camper van to go play shows or to just do something creative all across the country. Your insight would mean the world to me, and so I'd really appreciate if you could drop a comment below. Now, if you like this video, please do hit the like button. I know it seems silly, but it's the only way that I know whether or not you guys are into the content that I'm making. So it's some really good feedback for me to know what kind of stuff you guys are into. Now, that's going to be it for this video. So thanks so much for watching, and until next time, let's go make some music.